Ian Garry versus Khamzat Chimaev in an elevator match. Who wins? Does that sound ridiculous and silly? I don't know that I disagree with you. I will tell you, the story actually makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So, Ian Garry tells of a time that his teammate, right, it's fight week, and they're all out and they're in the fighter hotel, and his teammate is getting ready to compete with Chimaev. So in my mind of trying to work that back, like, it's very hard to know what team Ian Garry is with. Not for nothing, that's his business, and I'm not giving him a hard time, but I don't know what gym he is with. So I believe he was claiming Sanford MMA, and I believe the teammate we're talking about is Gilbert Burns, but it doesn't actually get disclosed. And the only reason I dig into that is to give you like a time frame. Ian Garry was definitely a name who had been discovered and been established, but Chimaev was a media darling. We've only seen 3 in the history of MMA. Media darlings to the extent of Chimaev, of Conor McGregor, and of Ronda Rousey. It was unexplainable and unusual, but Chimaev was one of those. And Garry was definitely a tough young guy who had seen his time on TV, but very different. So how they ended up in each other's wheelhouse, I don't know. But Garry tells the story that he and his wife, an elevator door opens. Inside of it is Chimaev and his wife. So Garry comes on, and these two have never met, but there was some level of tension which must have been done through the media. But I got to tell you, I don't remember it. Not only do I not remember it, I'm having a hard time even fantasizing of how Chimaev, which was a media darling, they wanted him fighting Usman, they wanted him in title fights. They wanted him to be the champ of 70, 85, and 205. Like, I'm having a very hard time of remembering any scenario where Garry and Chimaev would have spoke each other, or where Chimaev would have even known who Garry was to speak of him. On the timeline of Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns, like that, I'm lost on that whole part, I must tell you. But within Garry's mind, this is real. Whatever's been said has been said, and what he's feeling when he sees Chimaev, Chimaev is feeling when he sees him. And Garry says that, again, they're both just with their wives. So Garry says that his wife, her eyes pop open. She sees Chimaev as though, uh-oh, right? So they end up in the elevator, and the doors close, and the wife even makes a comment to him. This is the way the story went. Within the story, the wife had made a comment to him of, fight him. If you want to fight him, fight him. And it's like, wait a minute, you're all in the elevator. Like, did she whisper that? Or did she say it in Portuguese? I don't know. It was, the way Garry told the story was just that the 4 of them are in an elevator, which are relatively known to be quiet, and she says to him, you want to fight him? Go ahead, fight him. So the doors open, and 2 leave, whether it's Chimaev and his party exited or it was Garry and his party that exited. But they're now separated, and the wife then tells Garry, you're a pussy for not having fought him. Okay. It would have made me very uncomfortable, quite frankly. Like, if I found out that those 2 fought in an elevator, even if it was a verbal fight, if those doors closed and those 2 just started in on one another, in front of their wives, that would make me uncomfortable. I wouldn't look at those guys and go, whoa, that was a cool thing to do. Man, that was a weird thing to do. Why did you do that? Not to mention, if the elevator opened, right, there's something to somebody being there first. So if you got heat, don't step into the elevator if the other guy's there first. And what would happen if they would have fought? I mean, who would have broken that up? Who would have pulled those 2 buffoons off of each other? And then what good would have come from it? You had one guy that was take it or leave it at that time, right? Garry is now a star. I don't question that. I was in Boston. I heard the ovation he got. But he wasn't then. And Chimaev was the media darling. And the only commodity that a fighter has is his performance. The only commodity that you can monetize with a fighter is his performance. So to imagine one commodity damaging another commodity, stopping them from performing their ability, I mean, this is weird. This is really weird. It's really, really weird when guys mark out for the game. I am a fighter and I am a tough guy. You hear all of these things. You're in a controlled sport. Just so you understand, you're in a controlled sport of which fighting isn't even in the title. Like no letter here, M, or A. Of the M, and of the A, none of them stand for fighting. So you end up in one of these really odd situations where you have buffoons who would actually fight. I mean, there's a big difference in an athletic, regulated sport where you use the word fighting for marketing purposes. There's a very big difference versus the streets, which are a true fight, where that person will do whatever it is they can get away with doing to you in conjunction with whatever it is they feel they need to do to you to make this stop. I mean, I got to tell you, I believe the story. And there's times where I would just dismiss it. Oh, that's just a worker working. That's just part of an interview. There's times where I would dismiss it, but those times would always be in line in conjunction with somebody trying to build towards a bout agreement. These two are in separate weight classes, Garry and Chimaev. These two aren't going to cross paths. These two are very big deals, and they're very big draws. They're not quite main events, but they're right there. Like, there's not anything where these guys would need to work. Not anything where they need to go into business with each other. I took it as a very candid story. And when I hear the story, who do you think would have won that? I mean, how do you think that would have gone? And then do they have like an assembly of rules? Like, do they have an assembly of unspoken rules? They don't even speak the same language, and there's no referee, and there's no sanctioning. There was no gloves, there was no weigh-in, so on and so forth. But does the fight begin when the door's shut? And then what about when you get to the floor and it makes that little ding and the door's open? Do you stop? And then what if that's not the floor that either of you were getting out on? Somebody Christmas treed the elevator, but like what? And the door shuts again. Do you commence to fighting again until you get to another floor and the door's open? Do you let each other up? If one guy's on top and one guy's on bottom and you come back to your feet and the door's reshut to go to a different floor, does the fight resume standing? Who do you think would have won that fight? Garry versus Chimaev. It'd be very relevant if Garry was on that same card. Be very relevant. 2 days before the fight makes it 1 day before the weigh-in. Chimaev would have been sucked out. He would have been very tired. Was Garry on that same card? We'd have to go back and look. I'm assuming it was the card of Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. I'm assuming that. But if I'm right and they were both cutting weight, so everything's equal, who would have won that fight?